The silent self-destruction. How you're disassembling yourself piece by piece. You're not falling apart because someone attacked you. You're not collapsing because life is loud or cruel. You're being quietly dismantled by yourself, by the choices you make in silence. The nod you gave when everything in you wanted to shake your head. The smile you forced when anger was boiling in your chest. The yes you whispered while your soul was screaming, "Get me out of here." And you call it maturity. You call it diplomacy. You call it keeping the peace. But let's name it for what it is. Surrender, not to a sword, not to a tyrant, but to 1,000 moments where you chose to shrink. The leak of dignity. You're leaking dignity, not because someone stole it, but because you stopped guarding it. And the world noticed. They stopped asking what you think. Stopped checking in. Stopped measuring their tone around you. Not out of disrespect, but because you taught them not to. You taught them that you don't need to be consulted. You'll show up anyway. You'll nod. You'll agree. You'll stay. You'll explain. And they love it because it's easy. Because you're easy. Machiavelli said it clearly. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few truly understand what you are. And when people think they fully understand you, they stop fearing the cost of crossing you. Because what's predictable is exploitable. And the man who is always explaining, always softening, always available, becomes background noise. In a world that only hears thunder, you don't need more kindness. You don't need more patience. You need a strategy, the shift, from begging to commanding, a reason to stop asking for respect, and start commanding it through presence, not arrogance, but clarity, because Machiavelli never wrote for the well-behaved. He wrote for those who wanted to survive without self-erasure, for those who knew that kindness without boundaries is just a death by 1,000 accommodations. So ask yourself, are you still begging to be loved, to be included, to be safe? Or are you ready to return to the version of yourself that knew how to leave a room and let the silence echo like thunder? Because this world doesn't remember men who are nice. It remembers those who made absence feel like tension, who could vanish and still be heard. The quiet rage you buried. If this is stirring something inside you, not hope, but that quiet rage you buried long ago, then don't run from it. Let it rise. Let it burn. And if you're ready to stop playing a game you never agreed to, drop this in the comments. I no longer ask permission to be respected. Subscribe, not to follow me, but to mark this moment. The moment you stop being the diluted version of yourself and start walking the path Machiavelli laid out for survivors like you. Because from here on out, you're not playing to be liked. You're playing to be remembered. The quiet deactivation. Why you're being erased without notice. They're not shouting. They're not arguing. They're not launching an attack. But make no mistake, you are being erased. Not with violence. Not with betrayal. But with something colder. Indifference. At first, it's subtle. You're still in the room. Still invited. Still heard, technically. But something shifted. They talk over you. They move on without your input. Your voice lands, but no longer leaves a mark. Your words are met with polite nods, then promptly forgotten. You're still included, but never really felt. So what do? You smile. You nod. You understand. You tell yourself this is maturity. But is it? Or is it the beginning of your quiet cancellation? Where you're not exiled, you're just no longer necessary? Machiavelli would have smirked, because he knew what most men today have forgotten. Respect isn't granted to those who accommodate. It's given to those who disturb. You think your tolerance is noble, but tolerance unchecked is not a virtue. It's a strategy, just not one that works. Let's pause for a second. When was the last time someone paused before speaking to you? When was the last time someone thought, if I say this, he might walk away? If the answer is never, you already know why this part exists. You become too available, too safe. And the predictable man, he doesn't command a room. He blends into the background, while sharper men bend the energy around them. Let's be honest. People don't ignore you because you're unimportant. They ignore you because you've trained them to. You'll bend. You'll adjust. You'll smile through discomfort. You'll stay no matter what they say. And when a man becomes that easy to read, he becomes easy to disregard. Machiavelli said, It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose. But don't mistake fear for intimidation. He meant presence. Presence that creates pause. And pause creates power. Right now, you're not creating pause. You're creating comfort. No one watches their tone around you. No one hesitates before crossing your space. Because they know you won't push back. You won't leave. You won't surprise them. And what can't surprise can't lead. So if you feel hollow, if your opinions are skipped over, if your presence lands soft like a feather instead of sharp like steel, this is why. Not because they're cruel, but because you've taught them that your attention comes without cost. And if there's no cost, there's no value. The moment that matters, the fact that you're still here, still listening, still watching, means something inside you isn't dead yet. It's just been buried beneath years of being nice. And that ache you're feeling right now, that sting in your gut, that's not weakness. That's strategic pain. The kind that doesn't just hurt, it reveals. So let it reveal something. Let it burn away the parts of you that settle for being tolerated instead of being respected. Because the man who's willing to feel the sting of truth is the man who's finally ready to change his fate. So I'll ask you directly, are you ready to become the man people pause before speaking to? The one they can no longer predict or ignore? If this part struck something in you, write in the comments. I will no longer be easy to ignore. And subscribe, not because I told you to, but because you're choosing to step into the version of yourself that no longer shows up to be seen, but to be felt. Next, we go deeper into the emotional exposure that turned your honesty into vulnerability, and your openness into leverage for those who never earned it. Let's keep going. The invisible war, how you were trained to betray yourself. You don't see the battlefield, but you've been fighting this war your entire life, not with fists, not with words, but with silent concessions. Every time you swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, every time you laughed at a joke that made your stomach twist, every time you said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. These weren't just small compromises. They were surrender treaties, signed in silence, paid for indignity. Machiavelli warned, the first method of estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. But what about the men you keep around? The ones who treat your patience as permission. The ones who mistake your silence for weakness. The ones who take your loyalty as an open invitation to take more. You think you're keeping peace, but you're not a diplomat. You're a ghost negotiating for space in a room you built. The cost of being the good one. They'll call you mature. They'll praise your stability. They'll say, he never causes problems. But translate that. He never demands anything. He never pushes back. He never makes us uncomfortable. And in this world, comfortable men are forgotten men. Because here's the truth they won't tell you. People don't change for those they don't fear losing. Your kindness didn't make them better. It just made you easier to ignore. The Machiavellian pivot. Machiavelli didn't say be cruel. He said, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But fear isn't about intimidation. It's about uncertainty. Right now, people are certain about you. Certain you'll stay. Certain you'll forgive. Certain you'll choose them over yourself. Your predictability is your prison. So break the pattern. Let them wonder. Let them question. Let them feel the weight of your absence. The reclamation. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming relentless. In guarding what matters. Stop explaining. Start exiting. Stop begging for respect. Start commanding it. The moment you stop negotiating your worth is the moment the world starts paying your price. So tell me now, are you ready to stop being the man they expect? Or will you keep handing them pieces of yourself until nothing's left? Drop below. I am no longer negotiable. And remember, the strongest men aren't those who never bend. They're the ones who refuse to break. The final lesson, why silence is your sharpest weapon. The most powerful men in history weren't the loudest. They were the quietest. The ones who spoke only when it mattered. The ones who let actions roar. The ones who understood. Words convince. Silence commands. You've been taught that clarity comes from explanation. But true clarity comes from absence. From the space left when you walk away. from the silence after you stop begging, from the shock when they realize you were never theirs to lose. Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't about power. It was about perception. Men judge more by appearances than by reality. So stop appearing available. Start appearing unshakable. Let your silence speak. Let your absence teach. Let your boundaries cut. The world doesn't change for beggars. It bows to kings. Now, will you keep explaining, or will you start reigning? Comment below. I rule in silence. And watch everything change. The unseen reckoning. Why your greatest power lies in what you refuse to tolerate. There comes a moment in every man's life when the scales fall from his eyes. Not dramatically, but quietly, like snow settling on a battlefield. You look around at all the compromises, the swallowed words, the folded hands, and realize you weren't being patient. You were being erased. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. But here's what he really meant. The world will keep taking from you until you make taking costly. The economics of respect. Every relationship operates on an invisible economy. Your silence equals their permission. Your forgiveness equals their license. Your availability equals their entitlement. You've been running a deficit for years, paying out dignity while receiving IOUs in return. And like any bad currency, those IOUs have inflated into worthlessness. The turning point comes when you stop accepting counterfeit respect, the art of strategic withdrawal. This isn't about grand gestures or fiery confrontations. The true shift happens in the quiet moments. The invitation you decline without explanation, the text you leave unanswered, the opinion you no longer soften. Machiavelli called it the wisdom of the fox, knowing when it disappears so completely that your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. The antidote to invisibility. They'll call you cold when you stop burning yourself to keep them warm. They'll say you've changed when you stop changing yourself to suit them. Let them, because the man who cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. The man who refuses to explain cannot be manipulated. The man who walks away cannot be taken for granted. Your power lives in what you refuse to tolerate. The final choice. So I leave you with this. Will you keep feeding your dignity to those who mistake it for weakness? Or will you become a man who understands that true strength isn't in what you give, but in what you refuse to give away? The path isn't easy, but it's simple. Stop explaining. Start enforcing. Stop begging. Start commanding. The world doesn't remember agreeable men. It remembers unmovable ones. Comment below with your declaration. My silence is my sword. And watch how quickly the battlefield changes when you stop fighting on your knees. The resurrection protocol. How to rebuild yourself after years of self-betrayal. The most dangerous lie you believed isn't about them. It's about you. That you're too much, too intense, too demanding, too difficult. That peace comes from folding rather than standing. But Machiavelli saw through this centuries ago. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. You've been neither. Just pray. The anatomy of self-betrayal. Trace the scars. That time you swallowed the insult for the team, the dream you abandoned to avoid rocking the boat, the boundaries you dissolved in acid of understanding. Each wasn't a compromise. It was a surgical removal of your sovereignty. And like any amputation, the phantom pain remains. The counter strategy. 1. The inventory. List every diplomatic sacrifice you've made in the last year. Not the noble ones, the cowardly ones. The yes that should have been numbers. The silences that should have been roars. 2. The reclamation ritual. For each item, perform one act of deliberate disobedience. Said yes to that toxic project. Decline the next one with no explanation. Allowed disrespect. Let the next offender taste your absence. 3. The recalibration. Machiavelli's true lesson wasn't about manipulating others. It was about ceasing to be manipulable. Install new metrics. Not are they comfortable, but am I respected? Not is this fair. But is this tolerable? The Phoenix Doctrine. They'll whisper that you've changed. Good. They'll claim you're not the same person. Better. They'll beg for the old you. Best. Because the old you is a doormat. The new you? A fortress. Not cruel, just impenetrable to nonsense. The final covenant. This isn't about vengeance. It's about reconstruction. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary, until your presence carries weight without needing to speak it. Comment below with your declaration of independence. I rebuild on my terms. And remember, resurrection isn't pretty. It's necessary. The man you're becoming would rather be respected and liked, feared and forgotten, whole than harmless. The choice was never really theirs. It was always yours. Now make it.